Jetzt wird es ganz spannend über die Vermessung des Körpers und was man sich, nehme ich an, alles umhängen kann, um das zu ermöglichen. Applaus!
So, we're going to continue in English. My name is Bart de Witter. I'm from Belgium. I'm based in Vienna. I'm not a freak, but I'm a healthcare nerd. I'm passionate about healthcare and transforming healthcare through technology. That's what I do professionally since 15 years. And that's
Microphone, please.
Oh, I have to take it? Okay. That's what I do professionally, transforming healthcare through technology. And today I'm not going to talk about my profession, I'm going to talk about my passion, which is the quantified self. Has anybody heard about the term quantified self? Still? Can we, is it loud? Should I speak louder? Okay, a quantified self. Okay. So my entry in the quantified self started in 2009. There was a website called 23andMe. I analyzed my human genome. And so you get a test box at home, you spit in it, you send it back, and then they analyze your DNA. It's a public cloud, so everything is kind of visible. You hold DNA profile, and when I was be able to analyze that, yes, I'm Northern European, my genes come from Northern Europe, but more interesting was to see my health risks. I could see that I had a high risk of psoriasis, colorectal cancer, type 2 diabetes. Well, these are things that I always knew because my grandparents, like my grandmother had psoriasis and my grandfather had type 2 diabetes. But if the doctor says, do you have a family history of diabetes? You always say yes, but you don't think you're going to be affected. It's always the others. If you smoke, it's always the other percentage that probably is going to get cancer, not you. But if you see these numbers and you see it's connected to your DNA profile and you see this high risk, you start thinking, you start acting different. So I started consuming that information. And what I was doing, I was overweight at that time. I was nearly 100 kilos. I have an unhealthy lifestyle. I'm working for one of these big corporates in the IT world, and I travel a lot. So I travel 140 times a year, taking a plane, running from a hotel, getting up early in the morning. So it's not that easy to have a good work-life balance and to manage your health. So I started using Runkeeper. This is from an extract from my Runkeeper data. These are all my tracks that I run during the period of 2014-15. I ran a total of 400 or 500 kilometers, and then you can also as well see when I was running at the beach, because my passion is next to quantified self is kite surfing. So these straight lines is there where I was running at the beach. The other ones are mostly in Vienna and other cities. So next to tracking my runs, I started as well tracking my sleep. So I had this band on my head and I was sleeping every night and I was measuring my sleep. Pretty difficult when you travel alone. You need to bring that box with you. The customs sometimes, if you have hand luggage, they were looking at it, or what the hell was this? And I was measuring my sleep. Next to measuring my sleep, so I could see when I had my deep sleeping phases, I could learn out of that. I saw the data for 1 year. I was as well answering questions. How did I fall asleep? How did I feel? How was the bedroom? And I was answering these questions on a daily basis. I was tracking my health. I wanted to change that risk of having diabetes. I wanted to lose weight. At home, I had this Whitting's weight scale, which is very simple to use. You put it on the floor, you connect it to a wireless, and every time you get on that Whitting scale, it sends that data to a web account, and you can access it through your mobile phone or through a web client. I did something experimental as well. You can as well connect that through Twitter. So every time I was standing on that weight scale, I was tweeting my weight. And I had a community that was following me. I was very active on Twitter. And they were kind of encouraging. And it's not different from the Weight Watchers. If the Weight Watchers are coming together, well, they have a weight scale in front of the room, and then they stand up, and everybody goes like, oh, yes, or they go, boo, if somebody is not losing weight. So it's kind of the same. You have social pressure. It's a kind of motivation you have of changing your weight. And there was a funny story or anecdote on this outlier here. So suddenly I got like people answering, oh, what did you do? You lost 10 kilos in 1 week. And I said, but I'm not even at home. So I discovered that my cleaning lady found out where that weight scale was. And my cleaning lady was tweeting her weight. So now she has a separate account. I didn't dare to say her that her weight got tweeted. She's like 165 and she weighs 77. So I never told her that, but I have a separate account so the weight scale recognizes which person stands on that weight scale. But that was kind of a funny experience. So what did I learn? After 1 year of tracking my sleep and weight, which was in 2011, well, it was not easy to track that. Tracking is difficult. What I learned as well is standing on a weight scale and tracking your weight is different than standing on your weight scale and always lying to yourself, and that number was very different. I knew as well when I was at a party weekend where I drank a lot or where I ate a lot, then I knew I would not stand on that weight scale for a week because I was like eating less during the week. I was cheating on myself because you track. So you learn a lot of things about yourself just by starting to track yourself. You have already a behavioral change, but the moment you start tracking. As well, what I meant by tracking my sleep, I noticed that vitamin D, eating eggs in the evening was really bad for my sleep. But eating those fruits in our hotel room, the ananas and the grapefruits and everything what was there, which is full of melatonin, that really improves my sleep. I lost the first year 8 kilos, and now the second year I lost 6 kilos, and I've maintained my weight until then, more or less. I'm not going up, but it goes up and down, and sometimes I run more than I usually do to lose that weight again. My current project is very different. Quantified Self is a lot of people connected to health, wearables. The Quantified Self, you can quantify everything out of your life. So what I'm really starting doing is really quantifying my relationship with Natalia, my life partner. So we quantify, we ask ourselves, each of us, 18 questions on how our relationship is doing. We don't see the answers from each other. We answer questions on mood, on intimacy, on the status of our relationship. The reporter app that we use as well can use the APIs for my movement trackers, the weather, the location, my sleep data. And what we as well want to use over time is the digital communication. So we want to extract everything what we wrote, and perhaps in 2 years' time we can do sentiment analytics, and then analyze how our communication went, and then in 2 years' time there would be a nice PhD study on looking on that data, and perhaps we find predictors. Perhaps we find predictors I should go on a weekend with Natalia instead of just continue working and having a fight later. Perhaps we find early predictors of managing our relationship different. And it's not easy if you look at the divorce rates of relationships. Well, this is an important thing. So we chose to quantify our relationship, which is a bit probably for a lot of people freaky. But am I alone? I don't think so. Austria, actually, if you look at Sissy, if you go to the museum, Sissy was measuring her on 5 different positions of her body on a daily basis. If she gained weight, she was doing a diet because she wanted to be pretty and fit in those clothes. Sissy was quantifying herself. Sissy was, so every quantified self is probably a Sissy, you could say.
Sissy was a freak, right?
Yeah, Sissy was as well a freak. We are all freaks in some sense. If you don't fit to the norm. Who tracks their health? 60% of the people track something, like at least their weight. Some people track their blood pressure. And a lot of people track health in their heads, on paper, medical devices. Some people are using apps for that. And the trend is, of course, using and seeing what is coming to market with wearables is of course rising. A few examples, what we see happening on the healthcare market. Like this is from AliveCore. It's a device that you plug on your iPhone, and it can measure your electrocardiogram. The original business concept was to send that data in a store and forward concept. That means the data is being sent to a mailbox from a physician and then being analyzed and you get feedback. But through the years that they had that app and people were using it, they could analyze that app and define or develop new algorithms. And now they are really very accurate in defining arterial fibrillation without the interference of any physician. So by having the app, you can start tracking your health, your heart health. And this is just the beginning of that data. Another lab in the box, it's still not on the market. It's going to measure it has cartridges that you can analyze your sweat, your blood, it depends on each of the cartridges. It measures your testosterone, it can measure the inflammation level or vitamin D level. It does that in a matter of seconds. So imagine you go to a physician and you analyze your blood and it takes them 4 days and you don't even get the results, you get something that you can't read as a patient. Well, you see what that startup does, it really says like the inflammation level is elevated, perhaps we should drink a green smoothie. So they translate the information in information that is processable for patients, not for physicians. So they translate immediately that information because a lot of physicians and the medical establishment said, this is not something patients should look at. Well, I think patients are able to define themselves what information they can process. And if these startups really understand that if you translate that knowledge or that information into consumable knowledge or information for patients, then you're probably going to have a lot of interest in there. Other CellScope uses an iPhone as an otoscope. This could be useful in Africa, in the developing countries. You can send or you can use it as a telemedicine device. A physician remotely can look at it, but as well young parents. If you have a baby and is crying, you don't have to run to the emergency care. You can instantly get a diagnosis, especially if your first child and it's crying and you don't know what to do. iMitra is looking at your retina, especially for diagnosing diabetic retinopathy. At the beginning, it's all, as well again a physician involved, but over time we will be able to see that we're going to see through image analytics, going to be able to develop algorithms that the app itself is going to say how high the risk is that you have a specific disease. Another app, OsteoProud, My Sugar, the worldwide most used app for diabetes self-management. Frederick and Frank were the founders, and they both have diabetes. And in their team, the developer team, there are 6 diabetes patients, and their focus is really on developing an app where you can measure yourself. There is, talking about behavioral change, they put a lot of gamification in the app. So they have this monster, what they call it, and the monster can smile, the monster can look bad, and it plays with you. And it's not only for children. I started to learn gamification since I started using the app Duolingo to learn languages. Suddenly I'm addicted to the app and start learning a language for 3 hours because they have built-in gamification factors. Things that you can discover if you have suddenly all these sensors that start measuring factors out of you or measurements out of your body. Then this is these are 2 data layers. This is a genomical profile of a patient, and then the data that is read through continuous glucose meters. Normally you measure your sugar level as a diabetes patient a few times a day. The new meters, they continuously measure this. And if you put that data on top of each other and cluster it, then you can see that type 2 diabetes has 3 different clusters. So probably you don't have only type 2 diabetes, but you have type 2A, B, and C. And this can only be done by continuously monitoring. We are not able to see that before. So pretty exciting. MetaMind is brain scanning. So there are a lot of people trying to meditate and then getting biofeedback through the meditation process. And now there was a project from a Quantified server, the MindRider project, where 8 people rode their bicycle for 2 months in New York City, wearing a brainwave scanner, and then analyzing which streets were the most pleasant to ride in, where they had the less stress. So they get new information that we're not able to see before. So this is very exciting if you look at the collaborative aspect from the Quantified self, not only as an individual. Other wearable sensors that count your coughs and measure your respiration. I think for young parents very interesting because you never know is your child really healing, or is it coughing less or more? It starts quantifying the number of coughs, and probably over time it will be able to diagnose if it is a wet cough or a dry cough, and the same thing as the physician does, because the more data you can get, the better your algorithms are that we can develop on top of that. This is something that will come out and it's pretty exciting in 4 months. It's Healby. It's gonna automatically, because the one thing that we are really struggling to measure is our food intake, calories intake. I use my FitnessPal, and my FitnessPal is pretty easy to use, but you always have to manually input everything what you eat, and that's time consuming. So Healby, what it does, it measures your skin, and it reads the glucose level to your skin after you have eaten. And I don't know the whole principle how it works yet, but it seems to be pretty accurate according to the first reports. And this is what we all dreaming of, if you want to measure that, you don't have to do a lot of effort. Another quantified self tool is the vessel that really automatically knows what you are drinking, and it tracks what you are drinking and the calories what you are drinking. So next to your food, you can start measuring what you drink. I haven't ordered this because I drink on very remote locations, and I would always have to bring that thing with me. I don't see any use for it. It will be very challenging for me to use this. And then I think what is going to happen is that everything what we saw in Star Trek with the tricorder is now happening, and it's really focusing on self-tracking. It's focusing on giving us tools that empower us to measure ourselves and quantify ourselves. So probably in healthcare we're going from an episodic and reactive way of treating diseases, so I am sick, I'm going to the doctor, to more and continuous monitoring and a predictive kind of prevention kind of way of treating disease or preventing diseases. And these tools will allow us to really treat healthcare. The first talk of today was one of the biggest challenges is the demographical changes in Europe or in the Western world, is the aging society, and you will not be able to afford the healthcare services in 10 years' time with the amount of people that will consume healthcare services. We will have to do things differently, and prevention is cheaper than healing. So at the end, what we see in healthcare is what's going to happen is the more information you have about yourself, and the more you will be able to collect about yourself, the more personalized the treatment you will receive will be. The better the quality of your treatment will be, and the better your health will be. Another thing is, of course, the access to clinical knowledge. But I've talked now of the quantified self is really focusing on quantifying yourself, because lifestyle data is very important for health as well. And in that corporate that I work, we are really focusing on giving access to clinical knowledge through a product called Watson. So if you can combine these two, and you have access to all clinical knowledge that's ever been published, and you have access to all the patient information and can map that, you're gonna come to an accuracy medicine or personalized medicine level. This is gonna have an impact for payers. The payers, they will really focus, and you see it already. My Sugar was able to sell their app to one of the health insurance, social insurance in Austria. So the patients who have diabetes, they get refunded through the app. So the health insurance is really starting to refund apps. I'm next week talking to a Minister of Health in some Eastern European country, and we're going to talk about prescribing apps. If an app has a better effect than a tablet, why not giving a refund for a day, a use per year? So the payers are looking really into that. Of course they are interested in monitoring data, just as the banks do. The bank talked before, I was wishing that they also gave me information that they track on me, because the bank is tracking a lot of information of us. But they only gave my bank account, but they didn't give the other information that they have. And that could help me in managing a budget better, because that's one of the things that we quantify as well. There are a lot of apps that are really helping people to manage their budgets. Providers, they will, if everything goes to prevention, you don't have to go to the hospital. So a lot of these providers or hospitals are focusing on building up new service units where they're going to remotely offering services and support telemedicine. And then of course the pharmaceutical companies, they have discovered that these tools are a very cheap way of collecting new data and getting new insights, as I just showed before on the diabetes, where you suddenly have 3 clusters in the diabetes 2 group, where you probably can have preciser medicine. Now coming back to the quantified self. The quantified self is a movement of people who track themselves in a really, and this can be on all levels. People are tracking their health. There are people who are tracking every single minute. These are probably the freaks. Every single minute and try to collect data. They're using statistical analysis on that, and they try to find correlations and try to get new knowledge out of themselves, and then by finding that knowledge try to change things. So we have a global organizational network. We are at the moment available in 40 countries, 8 cities. And I founded last year the Quantified Self Austria, which takes place at the IBM offices because it's for free for us. And we gather there, we have presentations of startups. My sugar presented there. We talk about last week we talked about the resolutions 2015. So we had a kind of an unconference. Everybody was sitting together, describing what are my goals, how can you measure that you progress on reaching these goals, and what are the tools available, and are there people who want to form groups. In the US, the Quantified Self has created a lot of startups, a lot of tools, because they suddenly noticed that there was no tool for reaching that goal. Like I'm doing the relationship tracking, there is no real tool for doing that at the moment. So if you have that data, then you can start working and analyzing that. And that's the excitement about this, the network. We have, this is a picture from last week. We have as well 2 conferences. The global conference is going to take place in March in San Francisco. And then there is one in Amsterdam in April. And then the next conference, the meetup in Vienna, is going to be at the 19th of March. So I'm going to fly back from San Francisco, and then we'll meet again here in Vienna. And I would be really excited. There were a few people here today that already went to the meetups. I would be really excited if that movement gets bigger, if we have more techie guys and people who have a PhD in statistics, because that's also what you need, and that we can form teams to really start collaborating together and discover new things out of our lives, and try to not only measure ourselves, but hacking our lives and optimizing our lives, because that's what we try to do. So this was my short presentation. If there are any questions, I'm here, or we can do it now. So, thank you.
How do you see the quantified self playing into the scientific discovery process of new connections between the algorithms that analyze the data and then can prescribe things for you are based on existing theoretical models of how causality, so if you eat sugar you're going to get diabetes and all these things, that we know, but what about new things or niche diseases which maybe there is not much data on that, or existing connections that were not made between maybe different fields of activity or intake of food or travel or sleep, and how these all interact that we might. So my question is the discovery process of new health theories.
Creating knowledge out of information that can be used for clinical research. And that's actually one of the goals that I mentioned before, and it's what makes it kind of exciting is that the Quantified Self, first of all, is creating these new data layers that we didn't see before. You can use it for public health purposes, doing research, and you can do it for clinical purposes. Because health is not only health, health is not only a human genome that I analyze. A human genome makes 10% of your health state. 50% of your health is social and lifestyle. 30% is really the healthcare yourself, how you treat yourself, a healthy way of eating and living. So if you can all track all these things together, you will find and discover new knowledge. So, and what we do with the Quantified Self is we have the Quantified Self labs. They are based in California, and they are run by the founders of the Quantified Self movement. And they work together with Stanford, with universities, and these projects, and a lot of these startups as well, they share their data and they work together with research institutes because they don't have the capacities to get these researchers, because you need specific researchers, data, how do you say, like data researchers that really go digging into the data and have clinical knowledge. What I see as well is that the pharmaceutical companies, they were kind of sleeping. Like we were approaching them like 4 or 5 years ago. It's like, hey, you should go on this mHealth. It's going to help you to do clinical trials, cheaper, everything else. But they are just waiting. They don't know how to deal with it too much. Some of them have jumped up. My Sugar is working together with a few life science industries, but they are then interested in connecting the app together with their medication. So it's more about like a selling tool and having the compliance of the patient, that he's always going to take his medication on time so they can sell more, which is for me not the exciting case. So but I think a lot of the research is going to be made available through the research institutes. And then coming back to your point, as an individual, well, if you look at healthcare, healthcare is always based on a specific norm. But if you're an outlier, then these things don't work. You have a lot of the diagnoses that are not precise, and for you they don't work. For you the therapy doesn't work. And the doctor, you see all these medical shoppers, and they go from left to right and visit 10 doctors, and then suddenly they go to somebody who says like Ayurveda, and you do that, and they do a diet, and suddenly they are better. And there was a quantified survey that did that, and then analyzed what is that diet about. And then she saw she was allergic on specific. It was nightshade or something that was potatoes and specific things that are not in the diet. And she got extremely better. She was a NASA researcher. She was not some esoteric person. She was one of the persons, the lead researchers from who developed the robots that went on Mars. So, and she was able to dig in her data and found exactly the precise treatment for her, which the medical establishment didn't do, because she was this outlier far away from the norm. So it's very hard. I think technology will allow us that we're going to be more precise. And I think the knowledge discovery the gap of knowledge discovery, what you see now, how knowledge is discovered. If you design a study, you do a double-blind study, you publish it, it's being implemented in the healthcare system. This is a process of 8 years. Well, this is going to be reduced to nearly real time if you would connect all these data points. But then you have all of the issues of data protection, as I mentioned before, because this is very sensible data. I stopped tracking my sleep because Zio, that company went bankrupt. And then it's like, oh, this is nice. And then I read through the terms and conditions, and it was written, in case of bankruptcy, your data can be sold. I said, oh, this is even nicer. Like every day I was answering questions, how I slept, where I slept, location, and how many hours I slept. And that data has been sold, and I don't know who the hell has my data. So now every time I collect data, I look at the terms and conditions and read it, because I'm very sensible on this. And we should all be sensible on this, because this is, you can start predicting diseases, and you can start doing a lot of things there. Yeah. So,
short, please.
Next question.
I have actually two. The other thing is, you mentioned it some words, but I didn't really get. Of course, when people care for themselves, these things, it takes a lot of burden from the healthcare system, where we have a problem, obviously. So you mentioned that you have some insurances experience or countries which are willing to pay back some money to these kind of healthcare products?
Yes. So if you can prove that having an app, not only it's like if you have diabetes and you manage it well, you don't have to see a physician. If you don't manage your diabetes well, you can get blind or you can get your leg amputated. And that's going to cost the healthcare system way much more than managing your diabetes. So in case of diabetes with my sugar, it's the insurance really refunding because it helps the patient to really comply with the rules they need. So they learn about the activity, how much insulin they need, and the more data they collect, the better these machine learning algorithms that they have are going to be adopted to their behavior. And they're going to be able to manage their diabetes better. And if you can prove then that this app has a better effect than every medication that you prescribe, well, then why not pay back for that?
It was an Austrian insurance? No.
Yes, it was.
Really? The second question about...
Die Eisenbahn,
I know them. And how you see this discussion about medical device regulatory? So, you know, soon you come to the point where a physician looks at the things, you need to have the insurance of data quality and the medical device regulatories, you have to follow them on the hardware as well as software side. And mostly it's also the problem that, of course, when, for instance, coming to the biomedical signals like blood pressure, that the physicians only accept the standards of these recordings, and it's mostly not a measurement which is making on the wrist. How you see this discussion?
Yeah, it's very hard. The discussion is very FDA oriented. The website where I did my DNA, this is 23andMe, completely ignored the FDA at the beginning and has now been kind of shut down by the FDA. Because first of all, it's disruptive in terms of it's a direct-to-consumer model. Like as Tesla is selling his cars directly to his consumers, well, they are selling these tests where there's no physician needed directly to consumers. So the medical establishment doesn't like that, right? Because it's like selling the new blood test without having access or without having to go to consultation to a physician. So if the physicians are not liking a system, they will engage with the FDA, and that's what you saw with 23andMe. My position, if I talk to startups, is like play around with the system, especially in Europe, because nobody wants to pay for healthcare, because you pay your taxes to get healthcare. And a lot of these startups are quite very enthusiastic, but they're also naive, because it's like, I'm going to disrupt healthcare, I'm going to shoot all the doctors away, I'm going to sell to the patients. Well, try to sell to patients. If you pay tax money, if you're sick, you're going to the doctor, and the doctor is going to guide you what to do, and is a trusted person still. So you need to play within the system. So that means that you probably have to go to the medical device clearance of the FDA. I should do it as well. This is a process. It's hard, but it's feasible. And what I expect is that the FDA, the public image of the FDA, is now so bad, and that the last articles that I read is that the pace of approvals is going way faster, and the FDA is changing as well. But I don't think that there will be a complete disruption, that suddenly the power goes to the patients and consumers, that the physician lobbying and the other stakeholders will have their influence in this. So it's the most regulated market in industry, from all industries, so it's very hard to play. Is that answering your question?
Yes, I think it's very interesting what's going on, and I think it's also a long process to change these things.
Yeah. Philip.
What do you think about the fact that if you keep your data private, you're actually taking away from the collective potential to find... So if you keep your data and don't sell it to the collective, let's say humanity, where it could be analyzed and be part of some kind of algorithm that starts analyzing that, do you think that's theft from the rest of humanity by keeping it private?
Yeah, perhaps you should pay a higher insurance premium. I don't know. I think there's a lot of discussions on data philanthropy. Like you can donate your data. So there's a lot of there are new startups in the US that are focusing on when you die, that you donate your data. Because when you're dead, it's I'm not scared of giving my data when I'm dead. But the misuse of my data can be for governments or life insurance companies or whatever you can think of. The misuses can be pretty large. I think there is a personal trend here, like a lot of people, like I deleted WhatsApp because of privacy reasons. I'm starting getting much more aware of the misuse of data. So it's only us who's going to decide in which direction that goes. I try to move my friends from WhatsApp, away from WhatsApp to Trima. Nobody did it. So I'm not invited to these group chats anymore, and I miss some parties because of that. But it's very hard to answer that question. It's like there are systems where you can de-anonymize or pseudonymize your data and can donate it. So it doesn't need to be de-anonymized. But how can you anonymize genome data? You can't, because you have only one specific human genome. Right? So you can't anonymize that, and through your hair you can detect it. So it's very hard to look into that. And the human genome is one of these layers you will add to these data layers, which will make medicine much more precise. I think we need to work more on the regulations of misuse. But if I see now that Cameron and all the others are now advocating for the opposite, and I'm a bit scared, so that is not going to happen. Other questions?
So maybe, so I know that when you are a medical device manufacturer, you have to fulfill a lot of regulations and standards if you want to build a product and sell a product in a certain country. So how is it with apps or devices that I can use for my health? Are there any regulations so especially probably for apps or software which really which I probably really need or for my life?
Well, it depends. Like there are companies selling this is not a medical device, and clearly it measures medical data, but they say like a claimer, this is not a medical device, so they can bring it to market, but they miss out on the whole medical system. And that's what I said, the business case for each startup is not going to be with these consumers. Like my sugar, well, if you have the app, you're not going to pay 100 euros a year to use an app. That nobody's paying 100 euros a year for an app, but the insurance does. And this is the way the business model is. Because if you can prove that you can reduce the cost of diabetes care, and there's always a calculation, how much the app has an impact on the total cost of care in a life cycle, then you can start calculating. So the question is, if you have a startup, where do you want to play? Do you want to play in the consumer market? Or do you really want to go into the medical world? And going into the medical world, as I said, if you look at my sugar, it's not that complicated. You have a CE certification in Europe, and then you have the FDA. You need to go to all the regulation, and you need to go to all these steps. It's a lot of bureaucracy around it. And then in Austria, you probably need to go to the education, and you have all these regulations and regulating bodies that you have to go through. But once you are in there, well, you're probably going to have a more valid business case than focusing on the consumer market. Okay, I think my time is up to answer questions, but I will stay here for another 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ja, dann danke fürs Erscheinen. Ihr könnt euch natürlich noch hier bleiben und unterhalten und noch Fragen stellen. Ich wollte auch darauf hinweisen, es gibt die Seite battleforthenet.com. Hier kann man sich erkundigen, was die Amerikaner vorhaben. Die wollen, große Konzerne wollen dort die Netzneutralität angreifen, wie verschiedene Konzerne, die eben Dienste zersplitten wollen und für gewisse Dienste Geld verlangen wollen. Was man dagegen unternehmen kann und wie man noch einwirken kann, findet Sie eben auf der Seite battleforthenet.com. In Europa ist es schon entschieden worden durchs Parlament, es soll die Netzneutralität bestehen bleiben. Aber wie man weiß, alles was in Amerika mal beschlossen wird, kommt vielleicht irgendwann auch zu uns. Und damit wir weiterhin unsere Messdaten frei über das Internet verteilen können, ist es wichtig, dass das Internet neutral bleibt. Ich hoffe, es hat euch gefallen. Erzählt es weiter. Das Ganze lebt von euch. Macht Vorträge, wenn ihr wollt. Sprecht herum. Da hinten ist noch eine Spendenbox, wenn euch es gefallen hat. Und bis zum nächsten Mal. Danke.